So we're doing this is the Station Rainbow TV show, and we're here in DC with Dr. Thomas Stanley. We're at the Uptown Art House, and we've got a live audience. We got some running kids, and let's jump right in. So I was hoping that at first, to start off, that we could really get centered in the present moment and grounded in the present moment. As uncomfortable as it is to be here in 2018, that's where we're at.
Gotta be someplace.
Yeah. Because everywhere you look, there's just this stream of garbage, and you see it, it's bombarding everybody all the time. And I think that most people, it doesn't matter what's going on in your personal life, I think most people have a real deep sadness underneath, and anxiety about where things are at, and a lot of confusion. And so I was hoping that you could help us to provide some context and some clarity of where we're at.
Well, don't be sad. Don't be sad. Even in the face of great injustice and the misery of others, if you can be happy, you're contributing something to the situation. Things to me are moving along really quite kind of the way I sort of had hoped.
Yeah.
It's an interesting time. Politics is broken. People have an open invitation to do something other than politics. There's a lot of opportunity for experimentation as the powers that be are distracted by, the mess of things that's happening in the executive. The mess that the executive branch of government is making of things. I think there's an opportunity to use that as a distraction and to just experiment and be creative. The creativity of people always is faster and gets ahead of the initiatives of the state, the government. Are you sad? Did you get sad?
I feel sad.
Yeah?
Yeah. Things are okay. I feel happy on the surface, but there's some sadness.
I guess for me, it's like the thing, going back to our opening, the thing for me was never in a condition that it could be spoiled. It was never, now it's not any good. It's like I always kind of knew what it was. My biggest anti-hero in life is Richard Nixon. And, I was 15 when he left office, and it was like one of the happiest days of my life. And the whole scenario was, for me as an individual, was a object lesson in the vulnerability of power. That this institution that had always been so rarefied and protected, it was scrambling for its existence. And say all that you want about Dick Nixon, he loved his country enough to resign. Well, this guy doesn't love anything, and he'll stay in there until the whole thing is completely shredded.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So you shred something, and then you have lots of scraps. You have lots of pieces now that you can make something with. You didn't really have possession of the whole thing. So if it's shredded up, well, now maybe you've got something that you can actually lay your hands on and do something with. I think people have been really naive. In pretending, I think, that they can, with their the choices they can make within their individualized lifestyles, that they can sort of insulate themselves from a crumbling world. Money can't wall you off from this. It's a change, and it's a good change. It's a good change if you're not clinging to the thing that's sinking.
Yeah.
And that's easy enough. Just get off of it. It's sinking. We've been telling you that for a long time. Sun Ra said it's after the end of the world, after the end of the world. He said that 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. What are we invested in besides each other? You know, besides the promise of each new day, besides, you know, laughter, music, time to share with friends and loved ones and family. What are we really invested in? What's going on here that's so damn important, really, you know, at the end of the day? And if it has to stop, or if there needs to be a hiatus, a pause, well, maybe that's an opportunity to regroup, do something else. You know, money mongering, warmongering, well, we've done that really well. Let's do something else. No sense in perfecting this. We know where it'll lead. A sterilized planet. What's
Yeah.
that? Yeah.
Yeah. It does seem like anybody who thought things were going well, all those illusions seem to be evaporating. But I do worry that there's kind of new smoke and mirrors and taking the place of everything, like new narratives and new stories being told that spring up every day, really.
People got their feelings hurt by Mark Zuckerberg. Why? You sit down every morning with your cup of coffee and you spill your guts to everybody. And you find out it's not a secret, and it's, well, who told you it was a secret?
Yeah.
It was never a secret. You made it public. You know, why are we, why do we expect, you know, capitalism to have a moral compass? It's an amoral institution. That's what makes it so effective. If it was immoral, we would have stopped it a long time ago, but it's amoral. You can't bring it under the disciplines of ethics and morality. That's not what it's for. Its job is to turn everything into money. Everything into money. When I was a little kid, a bunch of years ago in the Midwest, if somebody had said, oh yeah, one day with all this free water coming out of the tap, you're going to be compelled to go to, like, you know, the store and buy your water in a plastic bottle, I would have just, you know, just laughed. And now, you know, if you can afford it, you don't drink what comes out of the tap because you know what's in there. Well, ultimately everything, you know, ultimately everything, if capitalism has its way, is monetized. Now, the thing about being black in America is that we are, this is why this problem is so stubborn, we are the largest class of people in world history to ever be monetized. You could buy land with slaves. You could trade slaves for board feet of lumber. You could, do you understand? Trade slaves, this many slaves equals that many horses, that many cows, that many pigs. We were a commodity like sacks of sugar. Sun Ra said we didn't come in here through the State Department with a passport. We came in through the Commerce Department. We were things, and we should take advantage of what that means.
Yeah, how do you see that moving into the present?
See, black people are already, like, we have one leg already in a post-human existence. And that's the only reason why we haven't perished. That's the only reason why we haven't perished.
What do you mean by that, a post-human?
Well, like, you have to look at the people that were brought here to do the work that whites didn't want to do for themselves as something like proto-robots. Okay? No technology involved, no chips, no digital anything. But there was certainly software. That is, there was certainly language that conscripted our bodies and what our bodies were allowed to do in this society. So, having already struggled our way out of a non-human status, 3/5 of a man, second-class citizen, our trajectory is not to stop at the merely human, but to keep going right on through. Posthumanity. We've been, you know, to be honest, people, oh, black people, why all these problems, these race problems, oh, why don't they move, why don't they change, why are we still dealing with this stuff? We've been waiting for the contradictions that are at the foundation of the American system to bring this house down. Now, Malcolm told you, house Negroes will clean it up for TV, and field Negroes I'm maybe the first professor in history to sit in a classroom full of white youngsters and tell them, don't be house niggers. Don't serve the interest of others ahead of your own interests. That's what the Occupy movement was about. The Occupy movement was about a whole bunch of middle-class white people waking up one morning and realizing that they had been divested of the American dream that was their, sole motivational complex, and it was over. And that movement had its moment, and everybody had a tambourine and a tent, and they made a conference call between the mayors of the major cities and the police chiefs, and they said, you think it's time? And they all said together, yeah, they had it. It was so cute, just like the old days, but it's time. And they took that movement and they put it in the dumpster.
Yeah.
What is the point of protest if you already know that they're trying to destroy you? What is the point of appealing to the ethical sense of people who have demonstrated their willingness to do all sorts of horrific things? He's pointing at the ear. So what's the point of that? We need real change. We need to create structural change. And the first place to start is with yourself. You have sovereignty, I like to use that word, over yourself. Yourself. Your brain is a part of your body. Your sweat glands generate sweat. Your brain is a gland that generates, oh my gosh, ideas, beauty, concepts, ideology. Well, free your ears and your mind will follow. Free your mind and your ass will follow, as George Clinton expanded. You got to get a grip on how you're using your brain. Socialization gives us all a bunch of bad ideas, and we're convinced by people that we know love us, parents, grandparents, teachers, rabbis, pastors, priests, imams. We're convinced by all these people that we're sure love us that these bad ideas that they're giving us, we have to aspire to them. We have to internalize them. We have to be true to them. We have to carry them forward, And I think that what we're seeing is an interruption of that transmission of bad ideology forward into the future. Our children deserve better. And this is the result of the past. So people that have this notion of, back in the day, or that there's something that can be revived or restored that's behind us, this came from that. There's a failure in logic if you say there's something we're going to go back to. I hate the idea of black people being nostalgic. About what? About what? Segregation. Oh, we had such close-knit communities when the Klan rode through every weekend and terrorized us. Yeah, I guess we did. There's nothing in the past that is so golden that it has to be, turned into almost like a monument or a god, or, I don't want to live in a mausoleum. My biggest disappointment as an adult is how much the present looks and feels like the past. And you can people hear me say that and they say, are you paying attention? Do you have the internet? Do you have this? Do you have a smartphone? No matter how many microchips you pour into this situation, my truth is that it feels pretty much like it did 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago when I was a small kid. It hasn't changed that much. The machines move very fast. We move very slow. We need to flip that around. We need to move a lot faster.
I see you on Facebook. You'll sign off a lot. Blackadelic AD.
Ah, yeah.
What do you mean by that?
It's Blackadelic Alter Destiny. All right, Blackadelic. Well, let's see. Let's tear it apart. Psychedelic. Black. So, you have some kind of reconciliation between the psychedelic movement and the Black liberation movement. Psychedelics. As soon as we say the word, we've got these antiquated tropes about sandalwood and hippies, and there's substances involved. But the point about psychedelic is not the substance or the path that gets you there, but it's the state of consciousness that we're talking about when we say psychedelic. And what we're talking about is any state of consciousness that allows the human being to tap into the truth of the world that exists prior to that truth being overlaid with language and culture. Mm-hmm. So psychedelics are a means. Psychedelic is a substance. Psychedelic is a practice. There are ways of breathing that are psychedelic. There's music we're going to participate in tonight that is psychedelic. But the psychedelic revelation is an opening to the world before it has been rendered sterile and inert by language. Language is a beautiful miracle. It makes a lot of things possible that would be very, very difficult without language. But its gift is also its curse. Its simplification, its chunking, its consensual and conventional nature forces us all, winnows all truth down to the lowest common denominator. And there's a lot of information that gets thrown away. A lot of information that might be very valuable right now in this particularly existentially challenging moment. That information is thrown away, filtered out. In fact, it's called noise. It's called noise. It's to be dismissed. There's another conspiracy theory. So, Blackadelic AD. AD is altered destiny. Altered destiny is a Sun Ra coinage. And altered destiny is a way of thinking about human progress that takes us to a plane of discussion that's beyond mere policy changes. Anything that you've already thought of or you might think of with respect to a social program, a revolution, a form of government, none of that is altered destiny. Altered destiny is a way of being a human in the world that we haven't tried yet. The weird thing about Sun Ra, and I think if there's a couple of things in my book, The Execution of Sun Ra, that I'm really proud of that I don't think the general public really gets how valuable they are. I spoke to a man named Marvin Jackman, and he worked with Sun Ra when Sun Ra was a part of the Black Arts Movement with Amiri Baraka in Harlem in the 60s. And he said the thing you got to understand about Sun Ra in Egypt, he wasn't saying that we are to resurrect the ancient Egyptian royal order and that wonderful precision discipline of that very complex. He wasn't saying anything like that at all. He was saying that everything that humans have done since the ancient Egyptians is basically a version of what they did, including the current order. If you're aware, the architecture in Washington, D.C., including the Washington Monument, it's all basically derivative of ancient Kemet. The Washington Monument is a tekken. We call it an obelisk in the West, but a tekken is what it was called in Kemet. And it's exactly the same proportions as the tekken at Heliopolis, which the ancient Kemetians called Anu. So really what he's saying when he says alter destiny and when he says the world is already over, everything that we've been doing since Egypt fell like, 4,000 years ago is just an echo of its greatness. It's like a...
Was power structured in a similar way?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Some dominant patriarchal figure calling the shots. A world, a civilization based around big buildings, big stuff, institutions, royal lineages. I don't think we need any of that. I think that altered destiny will be an inversion. It'll be like, you know what, we're done making big buildings. We did that. We did that for thousands of years, got good at it, saw the downside of it, and now we can do something else. We might be the most sophisticated people in the world meaning the cosmos, and we might be living in grass huts. I don't know. I'm not invested in telling you what altered destiny is. I'm invested in catalyzing human minds to increase the likelihood of its possible eruption is the way I would describe it. I think it's happening now. I think a space like Uptown Arts, I think all of these different little grimy crevices where real art happens and where people actually seize their destiny out of the jaws of capitalism, I think these are beautiful experiments and nothing but alter destiny. But we need to take it to, to the extreme. We have to push it right through.
What do you do when you get discouraged about all this?
I don't know. I don't get discouraged about this.
Really?
It's not. I mean, I get discouraged about like more normal stuff, like
Yeah.
like getting calls from school about my kid, or
Yeah.
not being able to. That's not what discourages me.
Yeah.
The changes that are going to happen in the world are going to happen, even if we don't help them happen. They're good changes. And really, again, the only people who have anything to worry about are the people that are clinging to that which has to be dealt with.
Yeah.
And everybody can get out. It's not late. It's not like, oh, it's too late, I should have listened, for it. No, you can get out now too. Start internally.
Yeah.
Start internally. Start internally. That pronoun, what do you mean when you say we? We are all on planet Earth. That's a tautology. That's immediately logically obvious. We. Are we all citizens of the United States? I can't tell by looking.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not. I was born here. I'm not a citizen of anything.
Yeah.
I'm not. I got a lot of friends.
Do you think that this kind of nonviolence that you're talking about, and do you think that it has a spiritual component or some kind of transcendent component? I guess I asked that because what you were talking about with the idea of psychedelic as stripping down language. Mm-hmm. When I think of that, I think that that seems like something where it's putting people on kind of a raw soul level,
mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if I'm putting too much of my own ideas about these things on it, but do you think that it has a kind of, or am I on the wrong track?
No, you're not at all on the wrong track. Human life is a really interesting thing. It's not enough to know the truth. You can read some Rumi, mm-hmm. and well, I got the truth.
Yeah.
But you have to experience it.
Mm-hmm.
You have to experience it. The reality is that there's one personality and one event. That's it. There's not division. There's not duality. So if my psychedelic revelation forces upon me a recognition of my unity with you, then any act of violence against you is masochistic. It turns back on me. In my own personal life, the biggest mistakes that I always make, are always when my anger pushes me out of my zone.
Yeah.
The things that I say,
me too.
and when you act to hurt, it doesn't take long. For some people, it takes a while. But when you act to hurt, eventually it comes back. In fact, you're better off if it comes back right away so you can learn your lessons. Some people, it takes forever. Mm-hmm. And then it comes, it's like, oh, that's what that was. So, mm-hmm. A little late,
Yeah. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about your music.
Oh, good. Let's talk about my music.
Can we do that? I wanted to ask you, if you could tell people who might not be familiar with what you do, if you could tell people a little bit about it. But also, I'm really curious with musicians what people are feeling in their body, in their mind, while they're, what the thought process is while they're working on new music, and I would want to hear a little bit about that.
I'm a performative sound artist who no longer stops people from calling him a musician.
Gotcha.
The first time I got called a musician in print, I didn't want to leave the house.
Why?
Because musicians know how to do stuff.
You do stuff.
Well, but musicians know circles of fifths, and they can transpose things, and there's a base of knowledge that is quite systematic and really quite large. And to be a musician is to excel at that body of stuff.
Yeah.
So, to be honest about my ignorance in those areas is to say, well, yeah, I can contribute to audio culture, but calling it music is more a way of describing how people consume it than how I intended as I put it out. So when I sit down, my objective is to get as far out of my, corpus as I can, out of, to leave the body, to OBE music, I want to just float away. I want to, and my hope is that the feelings and changes that I can stimulate in myself, maybe someone in my audience is feeling something comparable. It should be an away feeling. It should be a feeling of anti-sovereignty. It should be a feeling that there's no red, white, and blue or any other flag in there with you. It should be a feeling that has minimal precedent along with it. Do you know what I mean? Like novelty should be valuable. I don't know why novelty isn't more valuable to people.
How do you get to that point? What is I'm assuming that you're setting up circumstances to get there. What's that like?
For my kit, my assemblage of instruments, preparation is everything. And preparation is like loading weapons and filing them. You know what I'm talking about. Henry Longman knows what I'm talking about. It's Shaolin stuff. You're going into battle, and you want to make sure. I've gone into battle and had oh no, my saber broke. So you got everything prepared. You're ready to get down. You're ready to improvise your way into an altered experience.
How do you choose the weapons?
I like diversity in what I can do, and sometimes I have too many things in front of me. And recently I've gotten into sort of, I got all these different little things, and I'll just make different subsets out of that set of instruments. And in terms of what you play, you have to listen, and you're not just listening to what other musicians are playing. You're listening to the space and how the sound responds to the space. You're listening to how people, you're listening. Are people just talking over my stuff? Well, maybe I need to turn up. What is going on here? You're listening to everything and trying to not necessarily insert your sound graciously into the midst of these other sounds, but you're trying to create something that's almost like a foil or a counterweight to those other sonic experiences. You will be noticed if you kind of, you're over here.
Yeah.
Something like that.
What happens when you're going out of body? If it goes well, you're out of body, or you're out.
Right.
What happens?
Okay, I take my shoes off. And the space dilates. There's more space, and I don't mean more room. I mean more space. Hard to explain the difference, but there is a difference. And because the space is expanded, there's now room for more socialities, entities with which you can relate. And so, the spirit is the space is charged with spirit and spirits, and those things become personalities that you can dance with, and it's soothing kind of. It's the opposite of alienation. It's like being embraced by something that is very powerful, but that you're sure won't hurt you. Something like that. Yeah.
What are they like?
mostly playful, kind, inquisitive about me, like more than I think I deserve, because they're the you guys are kind of weird. I'm just like a person.
Yeah.
And there are all sorts of different colors, all sorts of different, like colors you haven't seen before, just, odd things.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know them, right?
I think so.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah. They get around.
Yeah. Lots of different ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, people think I am a little crazy, but in a good way. This whole psychedelic thing, like my agenda is joy and justice. Mm-hmm. I'm not a community organizer. I'm not a guy that, I'm doing some work now. It's in a challenged neighborhood, but I'm doing that work out of convenience for me, In general, what I want to do is build art that activates time and the people within time. And I'm not dismissive of the work that people do to repair the damage that capitalism inflicts on human beings. But I think that there has to be some kind of way of pushing on the whole system so that that cleanup, doesn't have to keep being done. That first aid, that remedial work doesn't have to just keep being done. And I think that art, because it fiddles around with the mythic architecture, if you do it right, I think art, honestly, stands the best hope of stimulating the kinds of changes that are about joy and justice. Everybody is entitled to joy and justice. It's an emergency. If one human being doesn't have that, it's an emergency. Joy and justice. Life is short for everybody. 100 years is really a very short period of time. So everybody should get out of each other's way. Nobody's here to mess up anybody else's parade. We don't know as much as we think we know. There's so, you know what I mean? Your ignorance is, it's so massive that if you can really get it and, really kind of take stock of how much you don't know about what's going on, then it frees you up from all these silly ideologies that are based on certainties. Mm.
What did you mean you said mythic architecture?
Oh, yeah.
What do you mean by that?
If history is the muscles and the skin, then myth is the skeleton. We really are participating in something like a very grand story. And the story is told not in, the specifics of a narrative, but in the broader generalities of mythic tropes. And what we work with are counter myths to destabilize, undermine, and hopefully at some point wash away the myths that have created this particular structure and this particular timeline. So, we live, this is, and it's going to sound horrible, but this is the world that was built primarily by Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ, with a little help from Muhammad, built this world. They built this world with their mythologies about paradise and the hereafter and everything that has to be done to ensure your place therein. So, you come along with a counter mythology that's about some kind of evolutionary force pushing people out of where they are and into where they're going to be. And you find ways of turning that into a material and putting it back into the same hydraulic system where the other myth structure is. It's kind of like putting sugar in somebody's gas tank, but not in a malicious way, in a good way. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. Sugar in the gas tank of the war machine. Mm-hmm. I like that. I just made that up.
That's good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much for doing
Thank
this
you, Liz
show.
Durrett. Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you, audience.
We'll put in a big crowd roar there.